So on the chapter about sexuality and infancy and adolescence, first thing I'd like to comment about is for everyone, your first sexual experience actually happens in the womb, as the text states. We've been able to detect erections on fetuses, male fetuses, and vaginal lubrication in female fetuses. So it's probably not the most comforting thing to realize that your first sexual experience was with mom, but it seems to be a physiological process of arousal and universal as best we can determine. So sexuality starts quite young. It continues on through infancy. Children, it's quite normal for children to go and play with your genitalia. It's up to you and your own belief system, how you choose to regulate that. A lot of sex researchers say, go ahead and let the kid do it. Just, maybe wearing one is the important thing. One thing I would like to note is even young infants can have orgasms. And sometimes parents confuse that with a seizure. They will go and they will shake, and so if your child experiences some shaking or intense movements, go see a doctor certainly, but again it may just be the child enjoying a moment relative to a serious medical condition. I'll give you a bit of a heads up on the test. Some of the questions you may find tricky, particularly. The book states that most children state that their parents are the most influential source of information regarding sexuality. However, they get most of their information from their peers. So those are two separate sources, the relative influence versus most information. I'll just state that I performed some research examining parental knowledge, and most parents had very poor knowledge about sexuality. We gave a straightforward multiple choice test regarding multiple aspects of sexuality. Most parents failed, only scoring close to chance on many of the items, only scoring close to chance on the overall test. So, it's not that you should always get information from your parents, it's we need to educate parents, because parents went through the same bad educational system about human sexuality. They got most of their information from their peers, then there's probably a lot of misinformation there. So education becomes important here. Another thing I'd like to talk about in the chapter is there's a special Think About It section on the origins of homosexuality. It goes over some of the biological theories or evidence for origins of homosexuality. Then it ends in Daryl Bem's exotic is erotic theory about socialization. There's a lot of evidence that it may have a biological component, some of which the book doesn't cover. Some of the variation sexual orientation may be hormonally based. Inga Ward back in the 70s did some studies where she took pregnant rats, stressed them out specifically on the 18th day of pregnancy. Day 1 through 17, nothing happened. Day 19 all the way through birth, nothing happened. But if she stressed it out on day 18, which shows a critical period being a window of opportunity or a window of time where some event must occur for there to be a change. Much like you may have heard about language acquisition. You must be exposed to language at a certain point in time, otherwise you'll never develop language. The brain will rewire itself, and the language centers will be rewired to process other information. Well, the same holds true for the influence of prenatal hormones. The 18th day, at least for rats, seemed critical in that when the mother rat was stressed out on that day, the male pups that she gave birth to tended to engage in more what we call homosexual behavior. Rats basically will engage in same-sex and opposite-sex behaviors, but those rats that were born predominantly gay were wanting to be mounted rather than do the mounting. Of course, we don't know whether any of that research extends to humans. Obviously, we can't go around stressing out pregnant mothers who are human and see the sexual orientation of their offspring. So, bit of caveat with the research, but that's just one example of some hormonal influences affecting sexual orientation. There's also been some suggestions the same is true for transgendered individuals. Why does this happen? It's the evidence suggests that the female hormones go and bind with the brain right at that critical time where sexual orientation is developed. The other part of that is Daryl Bem's theory, where he talks about exotic is erotic, that basically heterosexuality becomes socialized because anything that is different becomes intriguing and you want to explore. And part of that, he might think that homosexuality then is the norm and exotic is erotic. We're just socialized toward exploring something different. Well, the problem with that theory is there's not really much good evidence for it at all. If you look at the way people date, the old adage, opposites attract, is largely incorrect. People tend to date more and marry more within their own race, their own religion, people they're familiar with, etc., etc. So people date according to higher level of similarities than exotic features. As previously stated, I take more of an evolutionary approach toward research in psychology. It's obviously more evolutionary adaptive to be heterosexual than homosexual. It keeps the species going. The final thing I want to talk about is first sexual experience and virgin stories. When I taught this course with a message board, one of the questions that frequently came up is, do you wish you waited? And a fair percentage wish they waited. Or do you regret how it happened? I think a lot of people may not have had the best experience toward losing their virginity, and part of that, the ideal doesn't match the norm. What we're fed in movies and TV, the notion that it's going to be this beautiful, wonderful experience, and I think since it's many people's first time, they're very nervous, clumsy, and it doesn't meet the exact parameters that they have. So many people say waited. I'm not sure everyone wishes they waited till they get married, but I'm sure some do. Whatever you choose to do is up to you, and is perfectly fine. I'm not going to discuss the moral attributes of waiting versus not waiting, or preach to you what you should do. It's your body, your life, your morals. The one part of that discussion I always found interesting is those people who advocated waiting said they had better sex. And the problem with that is you have no empirical evidence of that. I didn't get married till I was 39. I think I had pretty good sex. I'm sure there's other people out there who may have had sex outside of marriage and may continue to do so. Hugh Hefner, I don't think he's bothered by, has low self-esteem, is bothered by his sexual habits, and would report having bad sex very often. So the two things can very largely be independent of one another. If you do wait till you're married, that's fine for you. But I think it might just get a little self-righteous and unempirical to say your sex is better than somebody else's sex. Appreciate people can be free to do what they want in the world. At least that's what we hope for in America. Thank you, and look forward to the next chapter.